the left to the right. Domain is just from the left to the right. See the X line, small to big. Mark the X line, small to big. From the low to the high, range is just from the low to the high. See the Y line, small to big. Mark the numbers, small to big.
Hello students, this is Coach Holliday. I hope you enjoyed the introduction video there by Trujillo Math. Found that on the internet, and today we're going to continue with our discussion on domain and range. If you remember in the last lesson, we talked about domain and range of continuous functions, and those functions were all line segments. Well, today we're going to look at full lines and also arrays. Remember, array is got a line going in one direction with an endpoint on the other, and you'll see that as we get going here. Okay, so go ahead and get your notes out, and let's get started. Remember, you're always able to pause the video, rewind, and repeat a part of this if you have a question or don't understand something the first time through. Alright, this first example, we're going to find the domain and range of the graph, and we're going to determine if the graph is a function. Alright, one thing when you look at this, you'll notice that our graph is actually a line this time. It has an input. It doesn't have an endpoint on either end. Those arrows at the end means it goes forever in that direction. So this graph is a true line, and it doesn't have any breaks, and it's going to go to what we call, if it continues going all the way in a direction, we're going to call that infinity. Okay, infinity. If you remember from the Toy Story movies, Buzz Lightyear said to infinity and beyond, and what that means is it goes on forever. So this thing goes forever that direction and that direction. Okay, the way we write infinity is basically a sideways 8. Oops. It's going to look like that, and when it goes to the left forever, it could be negative if it goes in the negative direction, left or down, and it could be positive infinity if it goes up or to the right forever. And remember, negative infinity was to the left and down forever. Okay, so we're going to remember that because we're going to use that when we write our domain. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started on this. So first of all, remember to do domain, we're going to write D equals, and we're going to put our set brackets. We're going to put an X in the middle. Remember, we're going to use less thans. We may have to use an equal depending on how our endpoints are. Okay. So now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to frame our object or our graph on the left and the right side so we can get our domain. Remember, the frame is where the boundaries of the graph are. Now notice, since this goes forever that way and forever that way, that means it's going to go forever left and forever right. So there are no left and right boundaries. So what we say about this, if it goes forever to the left, there's not a boundary, we're going to use this negative infinity. It goes forever to the right, we're going to use the positive infinity. Okay? Now this is one way of writing this, where I have that the domain is X is between negative infinity and positive infinity. But I can also write this, since it goes forever to the left and forever to the right and doesn't have any breaks, it's any number we could possibly come up with. So we could also write the domain is all real numbers. And the way we write all real numbers is we can abbreviate it by making a capital R that has 2 of the straight lines on the left side. That means all real numbers. And that's basically any number that you can think of. Right? Numbers that aren't real numbers, you don't know what those are at this point, okay? And you'll get into those in Algebra 2. Alright, so now let's look at the range for this. The range, remember, is the Y in the middle. We'll put our inequalities there. And we start at the bottom. Well, there's no endpoint at the bottom. It goes forever. So we would call that negative infinity. And it goes forever up, so there's no endpoint there. So we call that positive infinity. Alright, so technically that's what our range would be, but we can shorten this a little bit and abbreviate it because it goes forever left, forever right, there's no breaks. So again, we're looking at the range could be any number that we know of, so we'll say it's all real numbers again. Alright, so really we're going to use the domain as all real numbers and the range is all real numbers. Alright, if you write it like this for the domain and this for the range, that would still be acceptable, but most of the time you'll see either this all real numbers symbol or it'll just say all real numbers. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at our next example. In our next example we have kind of like half of a line. If you'll notice, it has an endpoint on the right, but it goes forever to the left and up. Okay, so the bottom has got an endpoint, or the right's got an endpoint, and the left or the top goes on forever. Okay, so we're going to start writing our domain. Put my x in the middle. Alright, put my inequalities. Now we're going to frame this thing where there's nowhere to frame on the left, so that means I have to put negative infinity. On the right, I can frame this by drawing a line there, or you can use your post-it notes like we did in class. And I'm going to get rid of this part over here. And this number where it crosses the x-axis is 5. So 5 is going to be my right boundary, or my big boundary. Sorry, it keeps erasing there. It's an open dot, so I do not need the equals. So this is one way I can write my domain. However, when there is the infinity part, I can just drop that part usually, and I can say that x is less than 5. And that makes sense because here's 5 and all my x values are to the left, or x is less than that 5. Alright? Now let's look at domain. Let's look at range. Okay, so we're looking at range now. And remember, we want to, for range, we'll put our set brackets, put a y in the middle, alright? And our inequalities less than. And now we're gonna put our boundaries, alright, or we're gonna frame starting at the bottom. So there is an endpoint there, so I can frame that, and that's at -2. So remember, that's my left number, or my small number. And I go bottom to the top. The bottom one goes on the left. Now, it never stops going to the top. It goes forever in the positive direction, so that's positive infinity. Alright, now again, like we did with the domain, when we have that positive infinity part, we can just kind of let that go and say -2 is less than y. But we typically like to write the y part first if I just have one simple inequality. So if I'll notice, all of my y values are above -2 or greater than -2. So I can write y is greater than -2. And remember, the result, when I flip the left and right side, I have to take that inequality and flip it with it. Okay? So traditionally, or typically, we like to use this and this for my domain and range. However, if you use the ones I'm going to highlight in blue, this one and this one, those are also right there for you also. Okay? So we're going to use this in class. Please make sure you complete the WISC, and we will see you in class.